So our final speaker is going to be introduced by Peggy Goldwyn. And under her professional name of Peggy Elliott, she wrote multiple episodes of the hit television series, including That Girl, The Odd Couple, and Happy Days. She was the vice president of the Samuel Goldwyn Film Company, published a novel and wrote film scripts, And in her free time, she founded a model children's center and was president of the Beverly Hills Board of Education, among other volunteer opportunities. After moving to the Wood River Valley, she has served on many boards and is currently on the board of the Andrus Center for Public Policy. And she is a part of the committee that cultivates our speakers for every year. And I'm so grateful for her contribution and that she's going to be doing the introduction of our next keynote speaker. Please join us, Peggy. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, for the kind introduction. And I'm so honored to be on the board of the Andrus Center and just happily re-upped for another term for a total of 9 years now, I think. When I'm constantly inspired, I tend to stick around. And for the very same reason, I have served over 20 years on the U.S. board supporting the work of UNFPA, the United Nations agency responsible for reproductive health and the rights of women and girls. In that capacity, I have been able to use my professional background to present a film festival of documentaries and dramas from around the world, illustrating the many hurdles that women face in life. And many of these films have been shown as part of this conference. Through my association with the UN, I became a fan of our closing speaker's work. I tell stories through film. Stephanie Sinclair speaks volumes with a single photograph. Her images put faces on some of the world's most serious gender and human rights issues. She is known for gaining unique access to the most sensitive gender and human rights issues around the world, including the occupation of Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. Along with multiple awards, her work has been often featured in National Geographic and the New York Times Magazine, among many publications, and have played a key part in several exhibitions mounted by the United Nations. I saw one of her photos being mounted on the wall in the UN one day in preparation for an exhibit and stopped in my tracks, riveted. It was a wide horizontal shot. In the background, there were soaring flames rising from burning buildings. In the foreground, a large group of people are fleeing across a bridge towards a camel. And the situation is clear immediately, but what is compelling is a young girl slightly in front of the rest of the crowd, seemingly all alone. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. And to this day, I am hoping she is safe and has found happiness. This is illustrative of Stephanie's best work, bringing into sharp relief the physical and emotional toll that affect the most vulnerable. Through the exchange of trust and compassion, many of her subjects show their bravery by consenting to allow their images at the lowest point of their lives to be shown to the world. One of the results of Stephanie's extraordinary empathy is the ongoing capstone of her career, a 20-year series, Too Young to Wed, examining the deeply troubling practice of forced and early childhood marriage around the world. This series has won numerous awards and led to Stephanie forming a nonprofit organization of the same name. The organization not only amplifies the voices of courageous girls, but also takes tangible action on the ground through partnerships with international and local agencies supporting initiatives in the same communities where the girls are provided safe havens to realize their dreams. I might add that part of the funding for her work is provided by her professional colleagues donating their own original works for auction. Stephanie generously flew 2 days ago from Paris across the Atlantic and across the entire US to the Pacific, where she changed planes in San Francisco and flew back across about a quarter of the US to be with us. So please join me in welcoming Stephanie Sinclair.
Thank you so much, Peggy. As always, that was it's an honor to be involved in anything that you're a part of, and I was very honored when you asked me if I would be with us, with you all today. And I also want to thank the team for being patient with my schedule. It was a little bit crazy this summer. I mean, thank you for getting the apple box at the last minute for height-challenged people like Peggy and myself, so we're not puppets up here. So yeah, I mean, I think I've been so inspired over the last couple days, and this is truly an extraordinary conference. And so I plan to definitely continue to attend, because I've learned a lot in all the sessions and from all the speakers I've heard, sharing their stories. And it's funny because, I feel like these types of conferences are a little bit of a conversation, because you're hearing certain things and then you want to kind of address them because they're really important in their and you can see how the curation that was carefully done through putting all of this together. So I appreciate so much the Andrus Center and the board and Boise State for hosting this. It's really quite special, and I'm honored to be here. So a little bit about my background. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I've been inspired by some of the vulnerability that has been shared. And my family is originally from Miami, but they grew up. I spent my summers in Alabama, and I recently took one of my team members to visit my family's house, and it's still on a dirt road. So I definitely come from a place of understanding the challenge that women and girls have in attaining, not just, and realizing their rights. And, I think that a lot of the things that I photographed through the years definitely came from genuine empathy and seeing how, and relating in some ways. And I wouldn't have gotten the chance to do any of the things that I did without my mother's incredible bravery and her resilience and determination. And she had a lot of health problems, but definitely, and we had violence in our family. That's the truth of it. And I heard her stories, and she just up and left, and she was like, "I'm out of here." And she put a big fat boundary between myself and a lot of my family members, and was like, "This is not what's going to happen for my child." And I think that she set my children and my family on a different course as a result. And so I think about her a lot when I do my work, and I think about the difference that we can make in providing boundaries and protections, and that's a lot what has driven me through the years. So I'm going to start with the picture that Peggy had mentioned. Well, it's from the same series at any rate. So this is during the invasion of Iraq, and I remember feeling like, a lot of people say, like, "Wow, you're so brave to be able to do that," but not really. I mean, I have a choice to be there. I had a choice, whereas this little girl did not. And like I think many of us in the room, I had a choice, to choose. I chose my path, and mine was after 9/11 as well, because I was a journalist for the Chicago Tribune at the time, but there was so much I realized that I just didn't know about the world. Why would this happen? Why would people, allow this to happen? What dehumanizes other people to that extent? And so, but I saw this girl and I thought, wow, if she can do that and she has no choice, then certainly I can try to tell her story. So that took me to Afghanistan as well. And in 2003, I was photographing women in the burn ward in Afghanistan because there was actually a phenomenon where girls were setting themselves on fire. And in an attempt, really it's a suicide attempt. And they were doing that, and they weren't really giving good reasons, like I burned I broke my husband's television set, I got in a fight with my in-laws, but it showed intense, repeated trauma. And that was the first time I ran into girls who had been married at really young ages. They were 9, 10, 11, and I realized, oh, okay, there's so much I don't know in the world. So this is a young girl who really inspired me. Her name was Mishgon, and this is in Herat, Afghanistan. And I was photographing her. She was 15. She was forced into marriage at 11. And she told me, I had photographed her, and I was actually jumping rope with her not that much earlier in the day. And she said, in my whole life, I've never felt love. And I remember thinking, well, it was a turning point. And we've heard about a couple times over the last couple days about we have these turning points in our lives. And I remember thinking, well, if she is living like that, then certainly I need to be spending my time changing this until this child marriage is no longer an issue. So that brought me to doing really looking into what was child marriage like. Is it something that happened, many, many years ago? What does it look like to be a child bride? And so I worked with, this was for the New York Times Magazine and National Geographic and other publications, and tried to look at, tried to document what this was like, because people didn't really think it was still happening. And I remember had an editor say to me, well, why do I care? And why should I care? And so this is a girl, she's 11, on her engagement day, and first time she'd ever met her fiance. And I'm proud to say that, again, now that we're working, and I'll go into the Afghanistan work, we're now working in the same villages where this photograph was taken. So I went and documented, researching what child marriage looks like. And what I learned over time is the value that was put on women's and girls' bodies, so that we were valued for our labor, for our fertility, for our sexuality, and really that's the paradigm shift that's happening. Is like how are we as a whole being valued for what we can contribute in other ways? And so I was able to partner with many different publications around the world, and went to probably over 20 countries working on this. This is actually a 5-year-old on her engagement day in India. But I will say she was one of the fortunate ones, and I checked on her several years later, and she was still living with her family. But her life had been predetermined. And the good news is that I have to say that things, that things are slowly getting better, but we still have such a long way to go. It's not lost on me that it's an issue here in the US as well. I spent about 2 years actually working with the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints for National Geographic, and I photographed many issues that community that were issues within that community for National Geographic. And but this was a young girl who was married to their prophet at the time, Warren Jeffs, and this is one of the other leaders with all of his wives. And it took me some time to understand, and really to try to learn about, the power structures in different communities and how that manifests itself in different places around the world. And I've stayed friends with several of people who left that community after Warren Jeffs' trial, actually. And so that was, they hadn't been exposed to what he really the depths of what had happened there, and then left, and we've stayed in touch, and I've actually met up with their kids in New York City. But it was quite interesting, and but I was always encouraged by the incredible resiliency and determination and power of so many of these girls. And this is a girl named Najud in Yemen, and she was, I think she was 9 years old when she was married, and she just said, I'm not gonna do this anymore, and she took herself to the courthouse and got a divorce. And she did. And so one of my friends, Delphine, and we did a book with her, and so if you're interested, it's really fascinating. But she ended up being like an international icon for girls, and won Glamour's Woman of the Year, Girl of the Year back then, and she's doing okay today. She's still in Yemen. There's been a civil war there for many years, and but she's now married at her own choosing. Another story that was deeply moving to me was about Boko Haram survivors in northern Nigeria. And I've continued to work with different publications who've graciously supported my work through the years. The New York Times and National Geographic in specific have been amazing, but these are incredible young women who've been through unfathomable trauma of being married, forced into marriage, abducted, forced into marriage, and then many of them gave birth and didn't have a lot of support from the international community. So we actually ended up bringing, when Too Young to Wed was formed in 2014, really, officially, it was a campaign from 2012, but we brought the girl in the middle, Yakaka, and a friend of hers, Hawa, to the United States to meet with, they met with 36 members of Congress, between members of the Senate, all the women senators, and many female congresswomen. And so that's some of the type of work we've tried to do over the years. But as Peggy mentioned, we had an exhibit. I had an exhibit at the United Nations in 2012 on the first day of the girl. And at that time, I was really moved. I felt like, we were talking earlier, I really felt like taking the pictures wasn't enough. I needed to make sure, particularly with this kind of trauma, that that something was done with it. And truthfully, at the end, it wasn't even enough to do exhibitions like that, in my opinion, even though it was part of kind of the backdrop for the Sustainable Development Goals, and actually child marriage is mentioned as target 5.3, it still felt like it wasn't quite enough, and I wanted to continue. So that's why Too Young to Wed was formed officially as a campaign in 2012, but then officially we were registered in 2014. And after the exhibition, and we've had exhibitions at the United Nations, at the Senate Rotunda, and we're hoping to have another one at the United Nations in 2024 as well. Because this issue is if without ending child marriage, and if you raise the age of marriage, you're protecting girls from so many things, from giving birth too young, from domestic violence, from being forced out of school, to so many different things are impacted that improve their lives. So that's why, and you break the cycle of poverty. That's one of the main things that happens, is that if they're educated and they contribute to their communities, it breaks the cycle of poverty. So, but in 2021, the Taliban took over Afghanistan in August of 2021, and it's like kind of having a weird skill set. I had worked in conflict zones, and I knew how to navigate I had a lot of contacts, and I had a lot of, knew how to navigate the security issues. And so myself and almost probably about 10 female journalists that had worked in these countries with me, we worked for months, and we evacuated about 1,000 people. And we went through, and a lot of them, it started with many human rights defenders, prosecutors, even this is the family that supported me with the picture of the little girl from Afghanistan looking at her husband. All of them are out. They actually live in Salt Lake City now. And This is Seema Rezai. She's actually a boxer, and she's hoping to be in the Olympics next year. So these were female leaders, and I wanted to share this project with you or this initiative with you, because I feel like these were female leaders. We were trying to make sure that their voices weren't silenced. This is a woman named Anissa Shahid, and she was Tolo Television's top news anchor, and she actually just won a night fellowship, I believe it was, last year, and so she's incredible. This is, and these are just stories of some of the women that kind of were writing to us about their experiences and thanking us. This is the first female prosecutor in Kandahar in southern Afghanistan, which is insanely brave. And so there were a lot of people who could get out through U.S. forces, but those were usually male primaries, translators for U.S. troops. But so many of the female leaders took these secondary roles, in building civil society and things like that, and just being a woman in Afghanistan and moving. Just doing things like mountaineering, like Akila here. I mean, she's climbed 8 mountains in Afghanistan, which was not something that people normally that wasn't accepted. And now her goal is to climb Everest. So most of them are now in Europe, and she's in Spain. And but what we decided, it was just an exposure to how much heartbreak and the loss of dreams, but also an ability to be able to help. If you can help one person, what then they can potentially do. And what happened as a result of that is many of our evacuees started volunteering for us. So they started helping us help the girls who were never going to be able to leave because they didn't have those kinds of jobs, because they didn't have an ability to, they didn't even go to school yet. They didn't. And so we started actually working in areas that were not even they weren't even areas that were covered by the previous government there. So we were working in Ghor province, in Badris, and Daikundi, just traditionally forgotten areas. And so at TYTW, what we decided over the years was to really focus on the hardest to reach girls, the ones who were the most at risk. And those were commonly, we have a program in Kenya now. It's quite a big program, and we're working with pastoralist girls there. We're working in several countries. We support different organizations, and we have our own team members in many of these countries. But we're working in India, Afghanistan. We're about to start a program in Pakistan, supporting 600 Afghan refugee girls. We're actually reaching girls in northern Nigeria, Yemen, Nepal, and a lot of this is going back to those communities that had traditionally opened, they had family members who had some exposure to a different way of life. And that's changed, that's increased even more so now with smartphones and technology and things like that. And they want change. They do not want to live in abject poverty. They just often don't know another way of life. And I hear a lot from people, is this cultural? Is this, why should we be involved? Is it cultural? It's not. That's not, in 20 years, I haven't found that that's the case. I've found that when people are educated of the benefit that can come to them by empowering their girls, they just, even in the most remote parts of Yemen or in Afghanistan, you don't, of course they're not all gonna be, rah-rah, but some of them, you get enough change makers, and then involving men and boys too, and because a lot of them are the ones that are traditionally the gatekeepers, and they really do step up. And when I have been able to see change, it's just a matter of trying to meet people where they are, is what I found, and not being judgmental. And I've heard a couple of the speakers talk about that, like not approaching things from a judgmental point of view, but really thinking about what is it that they're concerned about, and what is it that they're afraid of? What is it? How can we meet their needs? So Unfortunately, the fall of Kabul also led to a really intense increase in child marriage in Afghanistan because international aid was withdrawn, so much so because they didn't want all this money coming through the Taliban, and they're still not recognized, which I think is mandatory in this intense rollback of women and girls' rights. But I want to show you a video of Parwana. And she is, this is a story from Afghanistan about what this looks like from a girl's perspective and the situation that we were able to intervene in huge thanks to the team members who really, I think, as was also mentioned, they felt seen because they felt like their needs were really heard. And they saw the need was there, and they really did self-sacrifice and put themselves at risk. So I wanted to share Parwana's story with you. Oh, can you make it play, please?
An Iranian love song plays from a cassette as a driver navigates his way through the snow-dusted Laman Valley in northwestern Afghanistan. Crammed in the back of his station wagon is a mother and her 6 children, who've just left behind a life of constant struggle and hardship, all they've ever known. Among them, 9-year-old Parwana. Our cameraman Siddiqui asks her how she's feeling. "I'm so happy," she says, with a beaming smile. CNN met Parwana, dressed in pink, in an internally displaced camp in Baghdis province. Her father claims he was selling her to feed the rest of the family. He'd already sold his 12-year-old into marriage and told CNN that unless his situation improved, he would have to sell his 4 remaining daughters as well, including the youngest, just 2. Parwana's buyer, who lived in a nearby village, confirmed he was taking the 9-year-old as his second wife. CNN was granted rare access to film the final payment and handover. He paid a total of 200,000 Afghanis, just over $2,000 for Parwana, in land, sheep and cash. "This is your bride, please take care of her," says Parwana's father. "Of course I will take care of her," replies the man. As he drags her away, she whimpers. Moments later, she digs her heels into the dirt, refusing to go. But it's hopeless. CNN's story caused an outcry. US-based charity Too Young to Wed took the lead. Its founding executive director, Stephanie Sinclair, has been working to end child marriage and help vulnerable girls around the world for almost 20 years. She says the perfect storm is brewing in Afghanistan, and it's the girls that are suffering.
I know these stories are difficult to watch and they're difficult to do, and they bring around a lot of concern, but at the same time, we need to keep people understanding that this is happening. We need to keep ringing the alarm bell. Understand these are real girls and real lives, and they can be changed.
As a result of intervention from the charity, Parwana was allowed to return home after almost 2 weeks with the buyer's family. Too Young to Wed then organised to have Parwana, her mother and siblings removed from the camp with the father's permission. Their 4-hour journey to neighbouring Herat province was broken up with some childhood fun. Before arriving at the motel, a few days later they moved into the safe house. Parwana's mother, 27-year-old Reza Gul, has never lived in a house. She was sold into marriage at 13 and has since had 7 children, 6 of whom were girls. Most days in the camp she would beg for food, and often her family would go to sleep hungry. Now all she wants is to give her children a better life. "I have a dream, a wish they go to school and start an education," she says. "I have a lot of wishes for them." "They rescued me. They've given me a new life," says Parwana. "I thank the charity for helping me." Too Young to Wed has already begun distributing aid to Parwana's impoverished camp, among others.
these are communities that have relied on international aid for the last 20 years. And so with a lot of that aid stopping, these people didn't stop needing support. We can't let them pay the price, because ultimately girls always pay the biggest price.
I speak to Parwana on Zoom through my colleague Basir.
Hello, Parwana. I'm Anna.
Obi salamati.
How are you? How are you feeling?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
خوب هستی.
I'm fine.
خیلی خوشحالم.
I'm so happy.
نجات پیدا کردم نجات.
I'm safe. I rescued.
Then she asks, when are you sending me to school?
میخوام برم درس بخونم.
She wants to study and become a doctor or a teacher. But fairy tale endings are few and far between for girls in Afghanistan, even more so now than ever. Anna Corrin, CNN.
So we actually ended up naming our program after Parwana, which actually means butterfly in Farsi. And you know, she is a firecracker, to say the least. She's in school with her sister. They're in the same grade. They're in second grade. And all the kids are in school. But as you see, well, let me go to that picture because that's more interesting. So that's her in the back there, and with her hand raised. And we have about, at the end of this month, we'll have 2,500 girls in school in Afghanistan. And thank you. But as you all know, as leaders, that this is, you know, it's not possibly, you know, a journey that one does by themselves. It's, our team is beyond outstanding and incredibly dedicated, and they truly work with their hearts forward. And I think that is, you know, the girls are always centered in our work. And you know, one of the things they're doing is they are, I didn't include a picture of this, but I think about 2 weeks ago, they had a meeting with, so we have some men on our team that were also from evacuees. Some of their sisters were journalists, and including our senior program director, his name is also Basir. And they had the idea to get all of the mullahs in the community. So we had 100 mullahs get together, and they taught them about ending child marriage from an Islamic perspective. And so now, between all of their respective mosques that they speak out on during Friday prayers, they're reaching about 2,000 people with this message. And when you stop it with one girl, as you saw, look what happened with Parwana's mother. So when someone, you know, if they're stopped, they're not going to allow that happen to their kid, you know, happen to their children. And so, but when a girl is married, she loses complete control of her fertility. Even in the U.S., where we have child marriage as well, it's state by state here, and it's not as big as the cases. The numbers aren't as high as overseas, but the statistics are still that even in the U.S., and even if sometimes it's even consensual, like it's a girl who's in her teens and her boyfriend's in his, you know, not like 50 or something, he's much younger. But even if it's consensual and she wants this, she tends to give birth in faster succession and to more children. And domestic violence is usually higher, and education is usually impacted. And so we're seeing some of the same things happening in Western countries that we're seeing in developing countries. And so it's just been, I continue to learn every single day. I feel like I will say that we have about, I don't know, maybe between our mentors and our staff, we have now an office in Kenya and an office in Afghanistan. Full other branches. We have probably 50 staff, and it's a different experience being a journalist, being in the field, working with a few people, and then all of a sudden, like, managing much bigger staff and dealing with HR and benefits and days off and, you know, all this stuff. And so I've been like his growth spurt has been sometimes painful, but it's also been humbling, but in the most beautiful way. And I just feel, and I'm humbled to be here today to learn from all of you and the talks that there were so many talks during the time at the breakout sessions that I was like kind of floating in between different ones because I didn't want to miss anything. So I'm looking forward to the recordings, to being able to go back and see what I missed before. So I've put a lot on you. Oh, and I have one picture of Parwana jumping rope. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. I'm sure there's plenty because I just gave you kind of a lot to think about. But I appreciate it. Really, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was really powerful, and the work you do is so incredible. A quick reminder to audience members, you know the routine by now, hold it up, and the runners will run it up here, and I will try and get as many questions here as possible. One of our audience members wants to know how you get so close to these families, and what's it like to be able to be part of their lives and to take these pictures with them.
Thank you for that question. It's time. I mean, I think it's exactly what was mentioned yesterday. It's about relationships. It's about building trust. It's about explaining to them about the issues. Like I said, a lot of them just don't know. And so once they know, and I would often have even sometimes once I think it's done out of optimism as well. I think it's done out of that they want to be part of change. It's kind of like even with any kind of hardship that's happening, when people share their stories, it somehow validates the struggle that they've been through. And if they're going to be in serious poverty and lack of education and schools are closing and, or there's a really intense emergency, there's a kind of being part of the solution brings a lot of, I think, hope and healing. Even my mother, I was able to be kind of on the other side of a story, I don't know, maybe also it was around 2012, 2014. My mother actually passed away from medical errors after having a lot of health problems. And there was a ProPublica story that, because I had some journalists who are, obviously I have a lot of journalist friends, and so I allowed them to document everything that happened in my family after we had done a little healing. But it felt so vulnerable. I was just like, oh my gosh. I was so protective of my dad, and I was just like, I was a nervous wreck. And I remember feeling kind of really understanding now for the first time what it felt like to be all of the worst things that's ever happened to you. That was definitely the worst thing that had ever happened to me. And to have someone else see it, and maybe I made a mistake, maybe we didn't do enough. You always feel that kind of thing, and to let people into that moment. And but I will say, and I was so. I heard the term, I think Angie said it, but about the term being a little crunchy. I was a lot crunchy at that time in my life. I was a lot crunchy. And I just remember being so angry from all the things I had seen in the world, from all of the injustice, and then this happening to my mother, who was so good. And but it was so healing to have that out there and to have accountability be there, because otherwise, there was nothing that was going to happen. And it was a series of medical errors. It wasn't just one. It was how one thing kind of just set her on this cascade of error after error after error, which ultimately led, honestly, to quite painful and miserable death. And so, but seeing how healing it was for my dad, that we were able to let that go. And I'm sharing this just because it's about storytelling, and it's about seeing with open, and I guess being rooted in, as you were mentioning, about in your own vulnerability and your own we're all in this together. We're all going through this, and so we all have our journeys, and so just trying to operate in a way that we all can learn and grow together.
Thank you for sharing that. One of our audience members says, you mentioned the statistic of 67 million girls in child marriages worldwide, and gave the examples of it being widespread in the US and also in countries like Afghanistan. What are governments doing on this issue?
Not enough. I mean, there's a lot of, I think that there definitely needs to be a lot more. I'm actually quite surprised, when I go back out to communities and I see that it's not hard to find these cases. It's not hard to, the solutions aren't that hard. It's about resources. Nobody wants to put the real resources into fixing this. Girls' issues get 1.3% of philanthropy. I mean, it's like philanthropic giving is for girls' issues. I mean, it's just astounding. And girls in developing countries and the global south get, there's so much less interest, and there's a lot of corruption in so many different places. So I think it's a matter of continuing to push for those who can those in power to do something and holding power to account. Because if not us, who, right? I mean, we're here, we have the rights that we have because people pushed ahead of us. The generations before us did that. And so I feel like we have a responsibility to do the same. And it's really, communities are not closed as people think. Once they're educated about it, it's definitely fixable. And I'm optimistic, but I'll take the next question.
So this is a follow-up to that. What comes first to increase marriage age? Is it eliminating or reducing poverty? Is it educating young girls? Is it educating others? Is it something else? Education is, without a doubt, the single most protective factor against child marriage. And it's not just, I mean, if girls stay in school longer, there's actually more people just keeping eyes on them that know when they don't show up and things like that. And access, what I think is clearly a very overlooked and excused issue is, secondary school in so many parts of the world is not free. And that, to me, is astounding. Like, there should be mandatory, not mandatory, it should be governments that don't have that cannot use the lack of, we don't have the funds. You go and you see, like, there's plenty of mansions and stuff like that, even in countries that have, that are developing still. And there's definitely ways to prioritize and put more resources into girls' education. So that is the number one thing. And then the other part of that is community education. The communities and getting young people involved. The younger generation is not going to have the nonsense that we've been putting up with. And so I think really engaging young people, even in the communities where I just came back from Kenya not that long ago, and we did a program out there for about we're doing it for about 159 girls in that program, 160. And they asked, well, they're dealing with climate change, and they had a really tough drought and all kinds of things for the last several years. And the girls were coming to school and fainting because they were so hungry. And so we've provided food to the whole village. It was like 5,000 people, but the men and boys had come to us and said, can you do a school as well for the shepherd boys, the Morans who are out there and protecting the communities? Because when there's lack of resources and they're living off livestock, well, when a drought happens, then they have to fight each other for more livestock. And so they're very reliant on these guys. But they do see, they're starting to have some access to the internet through smartphones, and they're like, wait a minute, people aren't living like this. And so they're like, please, can you do a shepherd school? So we agreed. So we have a Chikuti school is what they call it, and we're doing a shepherd school for the boys and for the girls there. And because we did that, once we did that, then the young men came out with just a fury of like how important it was to protect the girls in the community, and it was really powerful to watch and just to be like a catalyst. Because certainly the heavy lifting is on the field teams, so they're doing all the really difficult part. But just actually more of not a catalyst, but really a bridge, right, between like people like yourselves and people who I live in New York now, people in New York, like being this sort of like being the one to keep pushing and connecting with the stories and making them feel like it's not so out of reach.
I think this just connection and helping people understand that they can make a difference, those are the things I think that are part of change. And education will help end the cycle of poverty. And all kinds of education. And then advocacy to continue to drive those resources to the communities, to the farthest areas, not to the capitals of these countries, but to the fields. So.
There's a number of questions about the U.S. situation and the role of the U.S. in this. So this viewer says, I heard a podcast recently that discussed child marriage laws across the U.S., and I was shocked at how many states don't have laws or reasonable laws in place. Can you share more information about this and the efforts that are in the works? And then a follow-up there is about comparisons that can be drawn between forced marriage of girls and the loss of reproductive rights in the United States.
Absolutely, and both questions I was sure would be asked, so that's why I kind of went through it quickly on the talk. So, we, Too Young to Wed is actually about to, we have done limited advocacy on the US side of it, more just journalism on it, but we're gonna start being more actively engaged in the marriage, US law situation here. I mean, some of the things that are a little complicated about this is there's a good conversation and debate that needs to continue to happen about, so there's a movement that is it's for 18 to be the law of marriage, no exceptions. But then there are also conversations that from NGOs and civil society members who don't want that to be the case because they are worried that it will impact a girl's right to choose to not give birth if she gets pregnant. So, because if she's treated as a child, she can't make, if she is too young to decide to get married, then she's too young to choose to have an abortion if she so needs it. But I was doing a story for the New York Times Magazine about the rollback of rights to access to abortion. And I heard of a 17-year-old girl. I was working with the Cleveland Clinic, and a 17-year-old girl was going to be, she was going to give birth. She was pregnant, and the baby was going to not live when it was born. But she was in Ohio, and she couldn't afford to go to another state to abort the baby. And so then there's what kind of trauma is she going to now face and deal with, because she has to give birth to a child, and her whole community and her teenage friends are going to see that she's pregnant, and she's going to now give birth to a baby that's definitely going to die. And so those are some of the very complicated issues that are happening in the US, and kind of why I think that it just needs to be addressed with nuance. And I think that there's so much that's, that kind of like broad brushes things. But I think there really needs to be nuanced conversations. I do personally, I believe in the right to choose because it helps girls, determine their future. And the worry is that if you can't, what about access to contraceptives? Where is personhood? All of that stuff. And so they are related. That said, these conversations just need to continue to happen, and they do impact each other. And it is something that we've been focused on where the most girls are at risk. So that tends to be because of our skill set. And there are other big NGOs with much bigger funding than we have addressing those issues here. So we have kind of been watching and participating sometimes, but not really, and doing more the journalism side of it, and letting those with much more robust funding kind of really, really get in there. But I think we do want to be more involved because it is where our organization, where our home base is, and it's important. And we have seen, I think globally, in so many places after COVID, we saw girls, were impacted more by the closure of schools. So we've seen climate change is impacting girls more. So we're actually seeing a rollback of girls' rights globally, not just, on so many different topics. And this is something, that's a project I'm working with the UN on, just about, it's an exhibition we have called Girls on the Brink, and like all these different complicated issues that girls are facing. Because our mission as an organization is to empower girls and end child marriage. So we're not just about child marriage, we're really about building girls up and helping them be able to be the next change makers. So.
It's such, yes. Our wonderful audience is also very concerned about your well-being, and there's a number of, I can tell you in that video, there was not a dry eye at our table when we watched that, and so many people have asked questions about how you stay empathetic and grounded in yourself without becoming emotionally overwhelmed dealing with all of this.
Like I said, I was a little on the crunchy side for a good portion of my career, but I think being a mother myself, I have 2 beautiful children. Being a mother myself has softened my harder edges, and I feel like a surrogate mom in some ways to a lot of the girls we serve who I go visit, and but it therapy, medication, all that stuff works. So, it's been a journey. So, I'm only human, and also I think surrounding yourself with love, right? I can't speak highly enough about our team. There are so many amazing team members that we have, and it's a joy to go to work, to spend time with them. And I know that, I'm sure they are like, that can be tough still sometimes, but I think that but I really think they feel cared for, and I think that we are able to all do this collectively because we feel empowered by the girls, we feel responsible for them, and we feel empowered by each other.
That's wonderful. Another set of questions are interested in kind of the technology and how that's changed, why pictures versus videos, and if you feel like you've ever gotten in the way in the process of documenting. Have you ever interfered or captured a truth that was harmful in the end in the process?
Well, that's a big question. Well, we do a ton of video. So I just didn't show that today. I felt like the Afghanistan project or initiative I wanted to share because it was one of those things like, sometimes you end up in a leadership position that you didn't intend to be in. And so I felt that was appropriate for this community. Like I went from being behind the camera to then all of a sudden having in this situation, and then following your intuition and having it actually work and be successful, and then feeling confident on that, and then and so that was kind of why I wanted to share that. And then as far as getting in the way, definitely when you're there documenting it, definitely impacts the situation. There's no such thing as you're not in the room, they see you. There's been all kinds of I don't know. I don't know for sure. I've tried to follow up with a lot of the family members that we photographed. Not all of them we could. Some of them were in dangerous situations and things like that. So there are some families that I can't say for sure, what the result was, right? We could only just, stay in touch with the translators and have them let us know, but you can't follow every thread, particularly after so many people that I've photographed over the years. But I think that I will say that I'm a believer in that connection, be it through video, through photography, through written stories, through audio, can change the world. I'm a believer, and I've seen it happen. And I think it's, as was mentioned, it's all about relationships. It's all about us being connected, and the more we empathize and see each other, see each other from and make decisions based on seeing people besides out of fear and out of worry, the more we will make decisions that will benefit all of us. And so, as you all know this, and so I'm just a believer in storytelling, and so I've kind of held that as my North Star.
I think the last question or set of questions is so many people want to know what they can do, how they can help you, how can they help Too Young to Wed, how can they help girls in Afghanistan?
Thank you for that. I mean, I would say, I always say that if anyone has, connections or ideas or want to support our work, you are absolutely welcome. I mean, I think it's, sometimes it's through connections and, having, someone do a story. Sometimes it's through funding. I was, so impressed with, Deborah yesterday. And I think that it's just, but it's all about just, I think if anyone can do whatever they can, wherever they think they can help, they are absolutely welcome, because it's needed. And there's a winter coming up that I'm very, it's going to be rough, and girls are going to be out of school, and it's not just Afghanistan, it's girls everywhere. And so I can tell you that this is a team that's on the front lines of the fight, and we're in it, and we're going to keep going. And if this is the type of journey that anyone wants to be part of, you are absolutely welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All set? All right. Thank you, everyone, so much.